Hey, we are. Look at this. We've got our crew coming in. Hello, let's bring it in. We've got, of course, Henry, and he has graciously allowed me to serve more as a host today because, as I like to say, there would be no Coach Thorpe that's known kind of in the basketball world without our guest today. His name is Ron Stewart. And I met Coach Stewart years ago at the University of Florida. Before that, he had been a college coach at Kansas State and SMU and Nebraska. And then since he left Florida back in the 90s, he became, I think, the winningest women's coach in Western Michigan history, and is now a G League and college scout for the Milwaukee Bucks. So hello to Coach Ron Stewart.
Hey, David. Great to see you guys.
Appreciate you being here, Coach. I call you Coach Stewart. As you know, I will always call you Coach Stewart because that's what you are to me. And I want to start with this. Henry's eager to kind of hear some stories about how crazy I was back when you knew me in my 20s when you first started recruiting, but maybe to start with how we met when you recruited one of my players, and then I'll kind of lead us from there.
Well, you're testing the memory here in terms of a lot of specifics. There's been a lot of trips since that time, but basically, it goes back to the key figure who we can talk about, Dimitri Hill, and your stint as, at that time, an assistant varsity and JV coach at Dixie Hollins High School.
Correct.
And we had just come to Florida, and you can put this all in perspective because at that time the AAU tournament that now we call everything AAU. But that was actually an AAU national tournament that was in the Clearwater St. Pete area. So it was a focal point of recruiting. And you'll remember that we signed, a player out of St. Pete area and then came back. And honestly, your loyalty, of course, you were a Florida Gator. Now I know you've got some ties to Florida State, some personal ties. Your money's going there, but you definitely were a young Florida guy that could tell me a few things about things that had gone in, the program in the past at Florida, as well as really honestly making me more knowledgeable about the state of Florida recruiting, and especially the area that where you were.
Yeah, so I had a player named Dimitri Hill. How would you describe Dimitri, Coach, when you first recruited him? And obviously he became a great player for you guys, but how would you describe what you remember of Dimitri? I know you've seen him recently too.
Well, and we did at a reunion, and he looks great. But probably the best description is the meat hook.
Yeah.
That's what he became known for as we went through the NCAA tournament. But Dimitri just...
what does the meat hook mean? Can you tell me, can you define that?
Well, he had a good hook shot.
Yeah.
And his name's Dimitri, but more so his width, his girth,
6'6",
his body
6'6", 300. Yeah, he played at the Final Four, 6'6", 300. Started at center for Florida that year. Yeah.
However, he was listed at 285.
Yeah. He was a unique player for sure. His idol was Charles Barkley. He couldn't jump like Barkley, but he had great hands and so Coach Stewart, before you came to me though, tell me, you were at Kansas State with Coach Kruger. You had a great NBA player playing for you, if I remember.
Well, for sure. And we can thank Dana Altman for that. Our staff at Kansas State, Lon Kruger had played at K-State, and then his first coaching job was at Pan American, which is now UTRGV, down in Edinburgh, Texas, and on the border, basically. And Coach Kruger used to joke that they not only could they not sign guys, but they couldn't even get guys to visit, down there. But he did a tremendous job there. And then he got the opportunity to really succeed his coach, Jack Hartman, when Coach Hartman retired at Kansas State. And one of my ties, just my ties through having been in the Big Eight before and having been in coaching, really, who was John Hammond, really gave Lon a call and said, here's a guy that you should look at, et cetera. And so then that became a 10-year relationship. The first 4 at Kansas State, and Lon hired Dana Altman, who brought Mitch Richmond, who was at that time a junior college graduate out of Moberly Community College, where Dana had coached, as well as another player, Charles Bledsoe, who started for us the whole time. And we were fortunate enough to go to the NCAA both years when Mitch was there. And then those guys led us to a Final 8 performance in Detroit. And that was an 88. That was 88. So,
and who knocked you out, and how did you do against them during the year? You told me a great story about that whole Final 8 situation, but I know you remember who beat you and winning the national championship.
Well, even when I try to forget, who beat us, I'm reminded by our assistant general manager with the Milwaukee Bucks, Milt Newton, who I told the guys, Milt wasn't even in a scouting report, and Milt proceeded to bring out the stat sheet from that game. Now, to answer your question, Milt didn't bring out the stat sheet from the other 3 games, previous 3 games that year, because Larry Brown, of course, was the coach. Danny Manning, and we had beaten Kansas. We broke the streak at Kansas. We had beaten Kansas 3 times that year, and then we were playing Kansas in the Final 8 for the chance to go to the Final 4. And we're up with 7 minutes to go, and then all of a sudden, I would just honestly tell you that the legs started going, and Kansas started making some shots. I don't remember that it was Milt, but Milt says it was him. And I think it was Scooter Berry that made shots against our zone that he had not made all along. And so, of course, the Berry family, tremendous basketball family. But prior to that, we played Purdue. We had gone to.
Are you accusing Milt of lying? I just want to.
No, I'm just testing Milt's memory in case he sees this broadcast. No, Milt and I have a very solid relationship. There's no question. There's no question. Milt was really. It's a teasing thing. Yeah. He teases me as well. Anytime I make a reference to a Kansas State player, he'll Zoom or not, he'll break in and say that's enough. That's enough about.
But Coach, I remember though, just to link something Henry's been talking about for a long time. Henry has been one of the leading voices in media regarding getting players rest and the impact of that. And so I remember you telling me you beat Kansas and Danny Manning 3 straight times, including the Big 8. I don't know if it was the championship game in the Big 8. But you had 8 times.
No, it was not. It was not.
Before the championship.
It was a semifinal game. Yeah.
So then you play them to go to the Final 4. But the story is you beat Purdue in the Sweet 16 game. It was a late night game. And by the time the players had to get random drug tests after their game in the media. And you said you got back to the hotel so late. And how did that impact when you talk about leading with 7 minutes to go? Where do you connect those things?
Well, let's go back the week before. We had played in South Bend, and in South Bend, Purdue was also in that regional at that time, which probably was called the Midwest. But things are different now. But in terms of terminology, how we label the sites, but we played LaSalle, Timmy Legler, Lionel Simmons. We played LaSalle, and then we played DePaul. A guy named Rod was the guard on that team. Rod Strickland, and they were very good. And so we won those 2 games, and then we were going home. Then we're going back the next week to Detroit, which was actually being held in the Pontiac Silverdome. So our locker room was the Detroit Lions locker room, and we're there, and we're playing Purdue. We played Purdue at 10 p.m. Eastern time, CBS game, and they adjust the timing of all those games. They still do for TV, right. But at that time we were the 10 o'clock Eastern game, and so we had a close game, and we win that game, and we get back to the hotel, and as you just mentioned 2 to 3 a.m. you're getting back to the hotel and getting settled in, and with Mitch and those guys, and at that time drug testing was different. It was a random pick 2 or 3 guys after a game, etc., and not the entire program that we all know now. Right. So those guys had to even to be later held up the team, etc., for those important reasons. Now we turn around and play Sunday. I can't remember, David, if it was a noon game or a 1 o'clock game. Now we turn around and play Sunday, but we had press conference on Saturday morning, late morning. So I remember getting those guys up and driving. Of course, Mitch was the guy that they needed on the right. Press conference. So basically, you went without any sleep on that Friday, and then you're playing again Sunday afternoon. You got the game in pretty good stead, and I really honestly, I still feel, you make excuses, but I still feel that we're in a game where we have a chance to go to the Final Four, and we're got in good shape. Of course, we got a great coach, we got good players, and got in good shape. And really, honestly, the last 4 minutes of the game, it just went south, relative to, I think, conditioning and all those types of things, shooting the ball as well as legs. So that was a loss to Kansas. They go to the Final Four, and they end up playing Oklahoma, which was Billy Tubbs, who we just lost recently. And they obviously had a great team. So that was a pretty good Big 8.
Yeah.
Big 8, not Big 12. There's a pretty good Big 8 back in those days.
But that's something Henry's big on. Well, we all are big on now, those of us that are pushing this, that we want the world's best players, which pretty much are in the NBA. Most of our players are the best in the world. And we want them to be at their best in the finals. And over the course of the 82-game season, preseason, it's just, we know we're not getting their best in the postseason. So as Henry's been on this band for so many years on it, I've always thought about your story with Kansas. Mm-hmm. You want your guys to be at their best in the last 4 minutes of a game. If they're tired because the other team's running you ragged, fine. But if it's because they were up late doing a drug test at midnight or 2 a.m, that's not optimal. That's always been his argument, right?
Well, and Henry, I just to add to this, the next year after Mitch was drafted, and I would just add that when Mitch was drafted, he was drafted the 4th or 5th, but he was the best 2 guard basically that was drafted early in the NBA, and he's the only one that had his degree at that time, actually. Oh, wow. So you can go back and look at all the data. But my point is this: the following summer, Henry, Mitch came back to our camp, which was obviously a very successful camp because of Coach Kruger and Mitch Richmond. We had him everywhere. So Mitch came back, and we had him speaking, in a corner of the gym. Mitch is speaking to a group. And I asked Mitch, what is the main difference between college, your approach to college and pro basketball? And he told the kids, the campers, rest. He said rest. He goes, in the NBA, you've got to get your rest. So, Henry, take it from there.
No, look, I grew up an NBA fan, and basically had the conviction that you just have to be tough, right? If Michael Jordan can deal with it, then everybody should deal with it. But only now, I don't know if do you use Second Spectrum?
I do. Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, much rather be going to watch a game, but second spectrum and synergy. Yes.
Right. So at one point at ESPN, we had access to it, and I just did some, you can ask it anything, right? And one of the fun things to do, it is, I just looked at when players have their peak velocity, right? When do they run the fastest? And because that's actually a pretty good marker, according to these scientists, I'm sure you know more about than I do, about like, how fatigued you are, right? How fit you are. It's like October in a regular season is, preseason is when most players have their fastest movement of the year. And then they get slower until there's like a little bit of the first week of the playoffs. There's a lot of fast moving again because they've a lot of players, big players have rested end of the regular season. But it's kind of it's a one little marker. And I've seen other things with blood tests that some teams have done where like, what a bummer for us who love the sport that by the time we get to the finals, we're watching people who aren't running like they can run and jumping like they can jump and, doing everything they can do because they're just so worn down. Seems a little bit like too bad. It seems like it'd be nice to see them doing their best.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the rest has always been, if you can call it an issue, I think the rest is a huge key. And I've learned, from our coach now, my Coach Bud, he has a way of doing that. He accomplishes that while still playing players and not just flat out holding someone out for a day of rest. He does it on the practice floor, and of course, where he's been. He came from San Antonio and all. And he is, right now, I think we have a great mesh with, Dr. Troy Flanagan, who is, who oversees, all of our training area and our rest and I saw a little thing there. Maybe I should be saying load management. I saw that, but it's definitely, I've learned from those guys. I would just say, and from afar watching, I've learned from those guys. And of course, Dr. Flanagan is from Australia. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but as you studied this, does it go back to Catapult? Does it go back to those systems that came to the NBA from areas like Australia?
Oh, so yes. I guess as I understand it, they were going to host the Sydney Olympics in Australia and they wanted to have a good home showing. So the government of Australia wrote some huge checks to invest in what we now call sports science, right? They just wanted to have all these little edges of measuring this and that. And I guess it was pretty effective, but that meant there were a lot of these experts like Troy Flanagan and I'm blanking on the Sixers hired David Martin was also from the Australian Institute of Sport. The Warriors hired a bunch of them. But yeah, so a lot of it comes from there. And I loved Catapult. Those Catapult guys actually put on a game for us where a bunch of ESPN dorks wore the Catapult thing and played pickup and they showed us all the measurements. And just sitting courtside at that game while I was exhausted, I learned so much, including like the Catapult guy taught me, their sports scientist at the time is now left, taught me that basically that thing I said earlier with your max speed is a pretty good indicator of, how well conditioned and rested you are, and how your injury risk is. And then he told me this fascinating thing, which is in Australian football, they started wearing all these Catapult things in game. And what they learned was if you just play players in 5 or 6 minute stints instead of 30-minute stints like they used to do, then injury rates went down 30%. And I was like, oh, that's the kind of thing we want to know in the NBA, right? Like
yes.
People moving like that kind of got me interested. So yeah, it goes straight back to Catapult for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a prevailing, it's a thought, it's a real presence. I think now with every team, but I really respect our group. I think they're really on top of it. And
are you seeing that, Coach? And when you're scouting games in college, or whether it's in person or more frequently now on TV, Do you think I know some colleges are catching up to this, but what do you think they are in general?
In general, I'm not sure it's widespread.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's widespread. I think we have a lot of things going on now, David. You go to a game and the ball rack lights up red and green, depending on which product you use, and the ball, it's, however you want. I don't want to, give somebody I don't want to speak and give the exact, I don't want to be incorrect, but there's more than one that follows the arc of the ball. We have cameras in practice facilities now. We do too, but in some college practice facilities, we have cameras and they chart those shots and the arc of the shot. And there are a lot of people that are more that are better about this, this whole new wave of analytics and how to chart than I. But it's not widespread. It's not like there's a conference that's adopted this product and everybody has it. But I say that because I know 2 Big 12 programs. In fact, I don't think you know this. I went to TCU and I saw Oklahoma at TCU. 2 ball racks on the sidelines with that ball, and some of them are flashing green. Some of them are flashing red. They need to be charged.
Wow.
So, and David, I've been to your workouts. I'm not sure you have the cameras in the gym with the balls that light up.
No. And I would say when you're as old as I am and have watched as many shots as I have, and I've been tested on this, I pretty much can see the angle of the arc and know what it is like a machine. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
David, do you think you can say it with a number? Like you can say that as...
Yeah, it's pretty.
Oh, we gotta set that up. I want to see that.
It's pretty crazy. I had a guy from Israel come in and do it with me because he was trying to sell me on this device that kind of like Ron's talking about. And I said, dude, I already see it in my head. He's like, no, you don't. And so we did. He's like, okay, you don't need this device. I've watched a lot of shots.
Yeah.
I also can mark it if I stand in one spot on my gym. I can mark it against the ceiling and know if it's above the mark or below the mark. Like I've just been doing this a long time. But I think to a more important point, I've seen college coaches, they'll be up 18 with 3 to play, and they still have their starters in the game, including some really famous coaches. And going back to Coach Bud with Milwaukee, I don't know that Giannis averaged, how many minutes was it, 32 a game last year? Because
or less. Yeah.
Or less,
yeah,
right.
Or less.
Like those are easy pickings. If you're looking for ways to rest, that's one easy way to do it when you're going to win the game anyway.
At some point, Coach Bud a couple of years ago, something about locking the gym. Like there were days when Giannis wasn't allowed in the gym, and I was like, oh, I know 100. I feel like I've heard 100 conversations that I wasn't in the room for with Troy Flanagan or Catapult or whoever. I'm like, oh, I know Coach Bud's imbued a lot of stuff into saying, Giannis, you're going home today. Yeah.
And they are doing that more, right, Coach?
Yes.
I know in pro and college, and my own son has talked about it. We're not even allowed to go shoot today. The gym's locked down, and there's also like massage days in the NBA, not in college, where they bring every therapist imaginable, acupuncture, whatever, but they can't touch a basketball. That's encouraging.
How do I sign up for that?
Right, I know. Yeah.
I've witnessed that. So Henry, I watch it as well, but I'm not in that line.
Right. Yeah.
Watching it doesn't seem quite as good. I got to be honest.
So I want to get to some other scouting things, Coach, but I do want to say this. I was telling Judy before we came on, when I was a young coach and you witnessed me in my 20s, I remember Coach mentioned Billy Tubbs. I was coaching a JV game once, Henry, when Coach Kruger first came to see our kid Dimitri play. This was his first game his junior season. Dimitri was their first prospect to recruit that year. Ron was the main recruiter, but the head coach has to come in. So Ron kind of sets it up, and now Lon comes in. And my JV team was on first. And I was, at this point, I'm in year 3, and my team was as good as many varsity teams. And we beat the team like 110 to 35, whatever. And Coach Kruger, and I was 25. Coach Lon came over to me after the game, and first thing he said to me is, "I didn't realize you were Billy Tubbs," because Billy used to run up the score, and it was a knife in my heart because that really wasn't who I was. I actually apologized to the other coach, who was a very nice man, and I said, Coach Crew was in the audience, and I wanted to show off for him, and I felt badly, but that's how I was as a coach. I was very aggressive that way, and Ron taught me what decency looks like, and Henry knows that's a big thing with me. You taught me decency, Coach, because here you were, you had a dream job to me, assistant at University of Florida, my alma mater. You recruited, and I'm going to get you to talk about some of the guys you recruited, but you always made it seem like I was the most important guy in the room, even after you signed my player. That never changed. And I remember calling, this is a story that I think is in the book that I wrote. I called you before we played Gibbs. You remember Gibbs very well, St. Pete Gibbs, one of the best teams in the country. In fact, there's a documentary, Coach, about Bill Teal coming out. They had a 6'5" point guard, Henry, that signed with Arkansas. Now, when Arkansas won the national championship in '94 with Corliss Williamson, Florida was in the Final Four that year as well. Bill would have been on that team. He would have been a junior on that team. They didn't win the national championship. He was from our area. We knew him well. And his team they lost one game all year to Oak Hill in a big national championships finals. We played them. We had one senior all underclassman, but I had scouted them 8 times. Plus, we already had played them ourselves. And I called Coach Stewart before the game, and I walked him through the game plan we had. And I think you guys were about to play. I think you played the next night. So I called you. I want to say it was at your hotel, and you walked me through it. And amazingly enough, we pulled the upset. We got a police escort out of the building. It was their senior night. And I called Coach Stewart, and you were so genuinely happy that we had done this. And of course, your player had 21 points in the first half. That helped a lot. But I learned years later, I didn't become a decent coach, I don't think, and a decent man 2 years later, but you were my model. I emulated how I carry myself on you. So thank you for that.
Well, it's hard to thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
No, you really
very
showed.
kind. It's very kind of you to say that.
So let's talk about your recruiting.
Let's be honest. You may have had another player later too.
Yeah, right. Oh, I know.
You're not going to just have one player.
You did. You signed 3 of my guys, Coach. It wasn't by accident. You signed 2 others.
Thorpe's genuine life philosophy turns out to be a long con.
So, Coach, I'm going to say a name. A lot of our viewers and listeners will recognize it. I think they probably know him as Chris Herron, but you used to call him Chrissy, which is my wife's name, and you've met my wife many times. Yeah. So you recruited Chrissy Herron. What was that like?
Oh, well, that's truly one of the things that I think about often. In light of what Chris has become, the influence that he has now on and the message that he sends with the Herron Project, the wellness, and all the things that are going on, and I did not know Chris's girlfriend at the time, but his wife now. I didn't really know her, Heather, but I know that she is as important in the movement with Chris right now as Chris and his associates. But it was. I went to a fall tournament in Connecticut. It was help me out, Wayne Simone. Anyway, a guy in Connecticut. He was a young guy that ran a tournament at Central Connecticut.
Okay.
I went there, and it was cross court, on a fall day in Connecticut, and I was watching, older guys. Chris was there playing for Leo Papil with the BABC.
Long-time Celtics guy. He just retired, I think.
Well, he didn't retire from BABC. He's still coaching. He's still coaching in. I think they're a Nike team now, but he's still there. And his assistant coach. You should really look this up. His assistant coach, who is certified by the NCAA to be on the bench with him, is his dog, his puppy dog. Now, does that sound like Leo?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little worried about the certification process.
Yeah, oh, yeah, true.
Yeah.
At any rate, Leo was coaching that team on a side court down at the end of the gym. And Chris Herron was dunking as a sophomore, was just incredible. And so I started recruiting, as we do, I started recruiting Chris and going to watch him and practice and scrimmages, etc. I can remember a lot of that, when he was a young sophomore and playing for Skippy Karam at Fall River high school, Fall River, Durfee. The high school is Durfee.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry, you made reference to this back here, but I can tell you that those two books that were written by Bill Reynolds from Providence, first on the Fall River high school team, Fall River Dreams, and then Chris's journey throughout college basketball and the pros that's now well documented with the Unguarded. And I have those. And so it was an unbelievable story, David. And I know that you can go to the Fall River Dreams book written by Bill Reynolds, and he documents a time when Lon and I came in to watch Chris shooting in the YMCA. There's also documentation of watching Chris coach in a, help me out here, but the textile industry, there's a history of the textile industry in Fall River. And there's a lot of tough neighborhoods there. There's a lot of, at that time, projects. Well, we were in the middle of the projects playing, and Chris was coaching a team on the outside courts. His brother was there as well. But, that's the kind of guy that he was in terms of his caring for people and so on and so forth. And then you can read as to how it went. It became a journey where he got involved with other elements,
right,
drugs, etc. And but we never stopped recruiting him. You can read about who was there. Joe O'Brien was at Boston College at that time. Patino at Kentucky. Billy Donovan was an assistant there. You can read about all those people. Stan Van Gundy was an assistant to Stu Jackson at Wisconsin at the time. And Coach Cal was at UMass. So it was quite the event. We're watching Chris coach. And I might just add that some of his players when they would take him out, would go, go smoke a cigarette on the sidelines.
Oh, geez.
Oh yeah, this was incredible. But, it's just, it was a great journey. And I'll sum it up by saying this. Lon and I are in Chris's home with Chris's mom and dad, and in Fall River.
Mm-hmm.
And Skip Karam, who's his high school coach, says, Lon asked the question, so Coach, what kind of player is Chris? Is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard, combo, whatever? And Skippy Karam goes, he's a god. and there was silence. And he said, yeah, Chrissy, he's just a god. He's a god. and Lon at this point is not able to, he didn't understand, nor did I, but so he's a guard, he's just, he's not a point, he's not an off, he's he's just a guard, but Skippy was, a long time coach at that high school, coached, all those guys. And, it just, so it was an adventure, David. It was an adventure, but
you used to just rave about
totally.
You used to rave about him, though. I remember, you used to always tell me about all the guards you were recruiting, and there was something really special. It was hard for me to really understand just how good the guy was, other than just hearing your voice that you had such respect for what he could do, but you were very worried. He was not the typical kid that y'all recruited. That you knew there was a downside. And the reason why I wanted you to get him, and I didn't tell you this before, in fact, I probably have never told this to Coach Stewart, but I was very involved in trying to get my kid Dimitri to sign with you guys, because as you know, Dimitri's, it was his guardian died when he was a junior in high school. And my
Yeah.
wife and I almost had to adopt Dimitri, as you know. In fact, Henry, I probably never told you, but right after his guardian died, because he didn't live with his mom, and his guardian was an assistant coach with us, Billy Donovan called me and said, "Hey, Coach Pitino wants to talk to Dimitri." And I said, "Coach, his guardian just died like a couple of days ago, this first day back." And Billy put me on mute or whatever, put his hand over the phone. Back then it was a dial-up, and said, "Hey, Coach Pitino, he'll call back in a couple of days." And then minutes later, Coach Stewart called me and said, "Hey, we were talking. I was in Mike McPheron's office, Ron, and you said, 'Hey, Lon wants to speak to Dimitri.'" And I said, "Yeah, but is Joe Ingram just died?" And Ron's like, "Well, yeah, of course. That's why Lon wants to talk to Dimitri directly." Within 2 weeks, Dimitri commits as a young junior. We didn't even play our junior season yet because I wanted to make sure my boy was taken care of. We were responsible for him. And that's why I've always thought about, when I think about Chris Herron, I think about, had he been able to come to Florida in that kind of environment. And I'm not exaggerating, Henry, when I tell you that Dimitri, my kid, grew up in a pretty tough situation and lost his guardian. And Ron called me, I want to say it was his sophomore year. Y'all did a clean room award where you would do like an ice cream party for the cleanest room. And Dimitri, who was not he lived in one of the messiest things I've ever witnessed. And I also used to drop him to basketball camps. I know what his room looked like when I pick him up at the end of the week. You called me and said, "David, Dimitri just won the clean room award. He's getting an ice cream social side." Do you remember those days, Ron?
Oh yeah, I do. I haven't thought of those days for a while, but yeah, you're
Right.
exactly right. We did do that, and we would have various our administrative assistant, our secretaries. We'd have them. They organized it to a degree, but they would be judges, and then academic Tom Williams, different people from the department would judge and go, and it'd be like a 3-member group, not a coaching decision.
Right.
So
those are big deals. Those little things are very important. And when you're trying to help them, I would love for somebody to do with my daughter.
Oh, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, yeah, I want my kids to go to Florida now.
Right. Yeah. The other thing I want to say, and then I want to get to your scouting, is you're close friends with R.C. Buford. Now everyone knows him as the Spurs, one of the guys who masterminded the Spurs dynasty with Pop. But he was at Kansas with Larry Brown. And then he joined your staff at Florida when y'all went to the Final Four. And so Ron introduced me to RC, who was back then it was called the restricted earning position. Am I right, Coach?
That's correct. Yes.
They limited how much they pay you. They limited.
We've come a long way from that.
Yeah. I mean, like $16,000 is some crazy number is what these guys pay. Tuition
based. Your salary was based on the school tuition. Yeah.
So for people to understand just what it takes to really learn the game, on weekends, my brother was in med school up in Florida. I had a player on the team. My wife and I would drive to Gainesville, stay the weekend at Mike DeLucas's house, if you remember him, Ron.
I do.
Of course, now he's Dr. Mike DeLucas, EDD. So on Sunday mornings at 7 a.m., I would meet RC at your practice facility, and we would do player development stuff. No players, just he and I. I was learning from him the player development business before I even launched my own business. Yeah.
Well, RC became a good friend during that. He was only there 1 year, and it was the Final Four year. And he's right up there, I think.
He made the wall.
But, he's on the wall. But now at that time, let's start by putting this in perspective. At that time, my kids were small, and RC and Beth moved in not very far away, just down around the corner from where we were. Basically, leased a house for that year, and their kids, Chase and Cece, were similar in age to our two boys, and so Chase Buford became friends with my oldest son, Ryan.
Yeah.
That was so now, and I know you know the answer to this, but the head coach of the Wisconsin Herd G League team in Oshkosh is Chase Buford.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, now that's not happening now, but he's with our staff in Milwaukee. But, RC, I thought, RC came, obviously, is a Wichita guy, a Kansas guy, and had learned, I think, a lot along the way. But mostly those things probably came from Larry Brown. I just remember a lot of the things that we did in practice and drills and adding things were tied back to what they did at Kansas with Larry Brown. And, the Kansas fast break that Roy Williams used extensively during his time at KU really goes back to North Carolina, Dean Smith. Now, Roy added a lot of things. It's very intricate. He added a lot of things, but and of course worked for Dean Smith. So then the Larry Brown thing, the North Carolina thing, Dean Smith, all that's tied in. And what he used with you, I think, or he was working with you on those Sunday mornings, I really honestly believe that, he probably brought a lot of that from Larry.
There's no doubt. But you say North Carolina, so I have to ask this. Vince Carter.
Yeah.
One of the best Florida players of all time. I met him in your practice facility, in the upstairs gym, when he was a sophomore with a broken arm or broken wrist. And you said, David, he's the best player. He's going to be the best player in the state. And if we get him, it's a game changer. So what were your thoughts? You didn't get him, but tell me your thoughts on Vince and how that whole process. We talked about Vince the other day, actually. He was a drum major in high school.
Well, see, no one knows that. I'm in my meetings, and even Rod Thorne, who consulted with us for 4 years and had Vince, with the Nets. They're good friends. Very few NBA guys knew that Vince was a drum major in high school. And of course, that goes back to his stepfather, who was really the band director, and and all that. So I'm not sure he had a choice, but he was, he playing musical instruments, and Vince, who I have the utmost respect for. But it was a journey of recruiting, and we really felt as though we'd be in a good position. Really honestly felt we'd be in a good position with him, not just hopeful and all that. But that Carolina thing now is tough to say no to, during now as well as during that time. And, things have changed now a bunch, but boy, that was powerful. And the trip to Chapel Hill was powerful. And I remember going to, I went with Coach McCollum, with Robert McCollum, who's now the head coach at FAMU, Florida A&M, and who plays Dana tonight.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's on the Pac-12 network late tonight. It's one of the added games.
They play Oregon tonight. Wow.
Yeah, they're at Oregon tonight. So he's in Eugene today. And but at any rate, Robert and I were sitting there in the gym. It was just us and his coach, whatever. And Vince, after school, he was supposed to be an open gym, whatever. He was just a dunk fest for Vince Carter. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was what was to come later with the dunk contest in the NBA. Yeah. He was incredible, just unbelievable. And as good a person, and we all know that now after all these years, just a tremendous person. And but had he come, now two guys that you haven't mentioned that kind of were in the same time frame. One is Doug Gottlieb.
I was going to mention Doug, yeah.
And the other is Miles Simon. And
right. I met them through you, yeah. Yeah,
those guys. Imagine that. Gottlieb recently tweeted that I told him Vince was coming to Florida. That he would be the point, and he could throw it to Vince all the time.
Miles Simon won the championship. He won at Arizona, didn't he? With Mike Bibby?
He was the MVP.
MVP, yeah. I met him in the O'Connell Center in Gainesville, and I thought he's not going to come here. It's a long way, but you recruited the hell out of those guys.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. Well, I love those guys. Let's just say that I to this day, I love those guys. And I get a chance to see Miles when I'm at a Lakers game and all that. But I used to see, prior to that, I used to see him because he did the Big Eight. He did color for the Big Eight games here on the Big 12, the Big 12 games here. And so I saw him throughout the state and everything. But great guys, tremendous character guys, and obviously have done well, in their profession and all. I might add on Chris Herron. That was back, 94, 95. Chris, as you all know, goes and speaks to college teams as well as others, but speaks to college programs and college teams. And a few years ago, Chris went to speak at Florida. He was in Gainesville, and he sent me a text and said,
wow.
Coach, first time back since 94.
Wow.
And he visited on the weekend when we played Auburn at Auburn. And I remember it rained the whole time. And, and I'm like, it's still Florida, but that was tougher and all. But that I wanted to throw that in because he did touch back. So, but I see those guys still. I'm still, even Vince, I have to remind him he's been through a lot of teams since then. But those were tremendous times. I worked with great coaches great people on that staff.
Coach, can I ask you about my friend David talks a lot about building a culture, by which we kind of have alluded to maybe if Chris Herron had been at Florida would have helped Chris Herron in a hard time. Or when in 2010, when LeBron and Dwayne and Chris Bosh went to Miami, David called me and he was very excited, basically like, this could be really good for Michael Beasley. He could be around these really hardworking players. It could change his life. Or I know we were talking about R.C. Buford, and I know there's a little story about basically Popovich is very proud that like Dennis Rodman was very good. He followed the team program when he was there, right? So this idea that like the surroundings can bring more out of the individual. How do you build that? How does a team become that kind of team that gets the best out of people?
Well, to generally respond to some of those guys that you mentioned, and the first person that you mentioned is really not retired yet, so I can't refer to him, even though he was on our roster at one time. But those guys, building a culture is really starts with the head coach. I mean, if you don't have a head coach who really creates an atmosphere of accountability, I think that's the key word. You're building a culture, but you're making your players and your coaching staff, all the people around you, you have a high standard where you're making people accountable. You're holding them accountable. And, in the NBA right now, you guys can cite, I can't, but you guys can cite different situations
where I'm just kidding.
Where they
like in a city nearby Dallas, starting with an H. I get you, Coach. I know you can't talk about it legally, but
well, there's more. There's others.
Yep.
There's others. There's more than one, and accountability is huge. And so with the NBA, it starts with your ownership and your general manager, the front office staff, and all that. But your head coach has to be a person that holds the players accountable and everyone around the coach. And I was very fortunate, 10 years with Lon Kruger. And I just saw him on Sunday. He still maintains those principles, and he helps people. David's talking about his player, Dimitri Hill, who came in and establishing that culture at Florida. We haven't really talked about what we inherited at Florida. And David knows more about that than I do. But it was a situation. We were hired for a reason. Lon Kruger was hired for a reason at Florida at that time. And, without being my way or the highway, because that's not Lon at all. He holds all of us accountable. And you have to build that, Henry, on a day-to-day basis, whether that is, going to class or respecting your academic advisor. And a lot of that has changed. The compliance people, back in the day, when we were at Florida, we hired Jamie McCloskey, who I believe is still there. But we hired Jamie as the first compliance officer at the University of Florida. Those people did not exist at Kansas State. You had a guy that might be responsible for interpreting the rules, but you as a coach, you as a coaching staff, you were responsible for following the rules, adhering to compliance. And the word compliance wasn't a word that was used like it's overused now. But all those areas, going to class, out in the community, serving the people, treating the boosters right, being able to speak at the booster club before and after, at the banquet, standing up and being proud. And so you recruit to that, you definitely recruit to that in order to build that culture. But it's an ongoing every day, and it's challenging. It's challenging because I think it's more so that way today, David, Henry. I think it's more so than it was in the 90s because there are so many outside influences.
Are you scouting to that too, Coach? When you're out doing what you do, and how do you go about doing it? How can you scout for, can this guy enhance our culture, or is he going to be a parasite in our culture?
Well, David, as you know, with John Horst, our general manager, and Milt Newton, we've already made reference to it. I love Milt, even though I was joking, but if he has a chance, he'll get back at me. But John and Milt and our ownership and all, they spend much time and money, as we do as scouts, discerning so many other elements other than basketball. And you're close to the game, so a great deal is spent, whether it's in sports psychology, and there are a lot of folks in these various fields. And what our people seem to do is find people who are at the top of the list, my opinion, but are at the top of the list. And David, it's amazing how much goes into the character aspect. And we had about 130 interviews for this draft.
Wow.
Yeah, because the time that we had,
Right.
we spent a lot of time, and it becomes evident to us, to others, when you're speaking for 30 to 45 minutes with an individual who's a freshman or a freshman to senior at that age group. But it goes beyond that with all of the things, be they medical or, there are private investigators that are hired by NBA personnel to look into all these things.
That makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we always have our friend Gerard Hector on, Coach, to ask. He'll always come up with a better question than what we have. But while he's coming on, how can you do your job now with COVID, probably for the whole season, if there even is a season? What can you do, and how different is it going to be compared to years past?
Well, it's defined and redefined it every day. We have, first of all, the draft was so late, and college programs, we would have been in touch with college programs in September, but we're still doing the draft. We're still doing the 2020 NBA draft. And so you look at things, but you're not sure exactly when you're going to be able to go out and if you're going to be able to go out. Right now, obviously we talked to other teams. Right now, I've gone to one game, and we've had another person go to a game, and then we're looking at going to some games now. But it's almost all video. All these we have, to be honest, our administratively, Ryan Hoover, Matt Bolero, but administratively, our guys have assigned us to various teams. And we're taking the month of December to dig in on all the players on those various teams. And it's almost all by video. Now, I live in Dallas, and we have, within a few minutes or a few hours, there are opportunities. And I live in Texas, so there are not as many restrictions in the gym. There are not as many restrictions in the gym as there are. For example, David Babcock, who's been around the Bucks for over 20 years, he's in Phoenix, and there's no gym that allows a scout in Arizona or California. So the point is, this is being redefined. We're on the phone twice a week now regarding this particular issue, relative to defining what we're doing, what we're going to do. And we say, well, maybe we're going to wait until January. A lot of college coaches are saying that. I talked to Steve Prohm at Iowa State in the summer, and he said he thought that the season would be conference only starting in January. And now you're hearing people say that that's maybe what they should do. So we're not allowed. Our scouting staff, we do college and pro. Not everybody does that. Most NBA teams have pro scouts and college scouts. We do both. That's John Horst. That's his philosophy over the past 4 years.
It's smart.
Yeah. And so when these guys get in the pros, I've seen them play college basketball.
Right.
That's not the case if we didn't do it that way. But we're not allowed to go to pro games. We're not. That's not. And the NBA has yet to, I think, put that in print. But that's where it is right now. So we're not allowed, and we're not allowed to go to practices for college. We're not allowed to be in the gym. The protocol, for every school is different. But I'm not testing 6 times a week.
Right.
The college team at the Power 5 or whatever, however you choose to say it, but at the highest level, they're testing 6 times a week.
Yeah, 5 to
and
6
so
times a week.
they can't afford to allow me to come into the gym for practice.
That's right.
Without so we're not allowed to practice to go to practices in college, and not allowed to pro games at this time.
Hey, Gerard.
Hey, Coach. Ron, thanks for joining us today. I got a question for you. You've watched a lot of basketball, obviously. What is the most difficult thing that you see from any player, whether it's college or overseas, that is a difficult thing that you see? It's like to translate into the NBA when they're playing, right? Like whether it's all right, they shoot the 3 ball well here, but sample size isn't big enough, or what have you.
Wow. The single most difficult thing, college and international. Gerard, I'm not exactly sure I'll give you a great answer to that, but as we do, we always try to give you an answer. So I think I think for in some areas, speed and quickness jumps into there. In some areas, defensively, their defensive IQ or mindset, but speed, quickness, footwork relative to guarding, because the terms that continue to have to apply with regard to your question on our staff is, okay, this guy can do this in the regular season, but what about the playoffs? And to me, that might be the focus of the answer to your question. This guy can really shoot it, but can he get that done in the playoffs?
Wow, yeah.
When you're playing the same team 7 times, back to back, etc. He can get his minutes. There are certain things they can do, but that's really a focal point, like guarding the pick and roll or using the pick and roll. there are some players, and again, I wish I could use names here and I could really answer this better, but
Well, it's all right. I could say it. Guarding the Cleveland Cavaliers pick and roll are very different than guarding, the 76ers pick and roll or something of that nature, right? little level of difference there.
Coach,
and then to add to that, Gerard, some college programs, a guard will come out having used the pick and roll 180 times a night, and offensively, and others, pass and pick away.
Yeah.
Not, so that's part of the answer to your question.
Coach, we have a hard out because legal makes us do
Dude,
it.
he's
But
not messing around.
I'm greatly appreciative of your time today, Coach. I know we'll be in touch. Please be safe in your travels. We need you around here a long time. Thank you so much, Ron.
Wear the mask. Roy Williams is the
Yes.
best.
Yes.
Wear the mask.
That's good.
Okay,
Thanks,